The first thing I have to do in this review is come clean. Anyone who read any of my forum posts on this lens will see that, like the Panasonic Nocticron f1.2, I felt it was too big, bloated, and a step in the wrong direction in the development of the Micro Four Thirds system. I was completely wrong. Far from being a step in the wrong direction, it is the ultimate expression of what the MFT system can do that others cannot. More eloquent than my words are the images here, from 6400 ISO in the Blues Club to the rowing and rugby. They're practically all shot at f2.8. The nearest f2.8 zooms in DSLR systems do not reach out to the 300mm equivalent. If they did, they would be unaffordably expensive. Nikon's superb 300mm f2.8 prime weighs 4 times as much as this lens and costs well over 3 times as much. I've seen this lens compared to the Panasonic 35-100 f2.8 zoom, but they're not alternatives. While overall performance is similar, a 300mm lens is a different animal from a 200mm. There are not many items of photographic equipment that can be accurately described as unique, without equal or like, but this one can. There is no other system where a 40-150mm f2.8 or its equivalent exists. My mistake was in not judging this lens in context. Yes, it is large and heavy and expensive by MFT lens standards. The point I didn't consider was that with this zoom range, it doesn't replace one lens, it replaces 2 or more. It will substitute for the gorgeous Panasonic 35-100mm f2.8. But whatever lens you add to your bag for the 150mm f2.8 length, add it to the Panasonic weight, cost and volume, and it will almost certainly be more. Take into account the Olympus 1.4 times converter, and the sum is compounded. Take a look at the price of DSLR 400mm f4 lenses, and gasp. So, I was wrong. Philosophically, this is an MFT lens through and through. Let's take a look. Firstly, you can't ignore the star quality of this lens. It's the real looker, sleek and sophisticated. It's the George Clooney, the Audrey Hepburn of lenses. From some angles, it even has a touch of Kim Kardashian about it. Functionally, there's little not to like. Turning the zoom ring is not as silky smooth as its Panasonic equivalent, probably because it has a lot more glass to move. The focusing ring is very smooth, and Olympus style, pulling it back puts you directly into manual focus with a satisfyingly assertive click-clunk. It has stops at both close-up and infinity, which I prefer to infinite turnability, and an engraved distance scale. There's a very clever lens hood which can be removed, but more to the point has a unique twist ring on it which allows the hood to slide back flush with the body for storage. There's also a sturdy tripod ring which, with a sensibly large knob, can be used to set the ring to portrait orientation. It's removable, but I find it just as useful for hand holding as tripod mounting, so for me it is effectively an integral part of the lens. On the side of the lens there is a single countersunk function button, which falls neatly under the thumb when shooting. The button is quite big, so there's no fumbling to find it, and the countersinking means it isn't liable to accidental pressing while remaining intuitively accessible when you do want it. If I seem to harp on about that button, it is because this lens will be used by many photographers for sports coverage. They will use continuous autofocus and then set up back button focusing, a technique for pausing CAF under conditions that confuse the autofocus system. With this lens, back button focusing is built in ready to use. No convoluted menu settings and no reassignment of buttons. Press it and focusing rests, let it go and it resumes. It just works. Brilliant. The lens weighs in at 760 grams or 1.7 pounds. It's 160mm or 6.3 inches long, increased by 3 inches or 75mm with the lens hood extended. In use, the focusing is lightning quick, as it needs to be for a lens likely to be used on demanding subjects like birds and sport. You won't be disappointed. Sharpness won't disappoint either. Stop down to f4 or 5.6, it looks to me as sharp across the frame as any of my primes. At f2.8 the edges are less critically sharp, naturally. Show me a zoom of any specification where this isn't true. But at no point in the zoom range could the edges be described as unsharp, and I am happy to use this lens wide open at 2.8 as a matter of course at any part of the zoom range. The wide zoom range and fast aperture means you get an interesting variation in perspective and depth of field effects. It makes this a lens par excellence for rigging the changes. Just walk backwards and forwards, keeping the image size similar, and observe the changing perspective. Change the aperture as well, and the same subject will yield yet more variations. If you treat the lens as a series of primes, 40, 70, 100, 150, it is just as much a pictorialist lens as an action man's. Distortion and vignetting and purple fringing seem almost entirely absent. I'm sure they exist on a lens test rig, but my only encounter with them was a bit of purple fringing on some tree branches at the extreme corner of a shot wide open against a clear sky. That I only noticed because I'd read about it and was looking for it. At this point I need a reality check. This is a 3.75 times zoom I'm talking about. Performance-wise it is impeccable. Summing this lens up, in fact, impeccable seems to be the word. You can criticise the size and weight. It is big and heavy by Micro Four Thirds standards. But big and heavy for a 3.75 times 2.8 constant aperture zoom with class-leading image quality? You can criticise its price if you want, but if you want a 150mm f2.8 with the capabilities of native Micro Four Thirds, what else will you buy? And if you want a zoom, well, you can't buy this configuration in any other system, let alone MFT. This is a lens that feels like it was designed by photographers for photographers. An example, the front element of this lens is 72mm across, and therefore prone to gathering stray light rays. So Olympus have baffled the interior surface of the hood. Not only have they neatly solved the aggro of storing and deploying a lens hood with their twist and slide functionality, they have made it optically efficient too. So, optically and functionally, this lens is a tour de force. So impressed was I that I bought an Olympus EM5 body with its Otherworldly Stabilization to use it on. While it works just as well on Panasonic cameras, I regard stabilization as a necessity on a lens like this. Finally, while my knee-jerk reaction to this lens, that it was big, bloated and not in the spirit of the Micro Four Thirds system, was misguided, it does still have some force. If your conception of Micro Four Thirds is of a step up from a bridge camera, compact, lightweight and reasonably priced, with excellent image quality, this lens is big, heavy and expensive. On the other hand, if your conception of MFT is a realistic replacement for a professional system, a compact and light DSLR for the 21st century, offering competitive image quality and competitive pricing, this lens is small, light and reasonably priced for its performance and specification. Both concepts are at the same time right and wrong. Judge without any preconceptions of what a Micro Four Thirds lens should be, purely on its merits as an optic. I can honestly say that, like another lens I theoretically have no taste for, the Panasonic f1.2 Nocticron, it is one of the finest lenses I have ever used. The difference is that the Nocticron simply polishes something I can already do perfectly well with my Olympus 45mm. The 40-150mm f2.8 does what my Panasonic 35-100 2.8 will do just as well, but adds a whole new dimension on top. From 100 to 150mm doesn't sound a lot as a number, but 4 times to 6 times magnification is a big photographic difference. It might even mean one less lens in your bag, especially with a 1.4 times converter, which I'll review separately. So is it worth it? I can definitively answer that yes or no, depending on your point of view. Thanks for watching.